G'day YouTube, Turbo Tristan here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be attempting to build an engine. This is the very daunting task of building my very first engine. I am not a mechanic, I am not qualified, I've never built an engine before. So they're all my excuses, but I do have most of the parts to put it all together. I'm going to put the rotating assembly together, the bottom end, and put the head on. As you'll see in this video, I've done a little bit of work here and there over the last couple of weeks, doing little bits and pieces, so I'll chuck those in the mix and show you what I've done. That includes gapping and filing the piston rings, assembling the rods and the pistons. I've finished off the head, so you'll see that later on. I've cleaned up the block. It's all covered in oil at the moment because I've had it sitting for a few weeks. I'm going to go ahead and use some flexi gauge to measure the bearing clearances to make sure everything's sweet. And then I'm going to assemble it all. I've got my ARP head studs, bearings, pistons, rods, rings, head studs. That's all ready to go. Valve trains ready to go. Got the head gasket, got the intake gasket. I might have the wrong timing belt, I'm not sure. I've got the crankshaft rear main seal. I do need to order a camshaft front seal. I've just forgot, so I'll get that done soon. Water pump's there. I'm waiting on the oil pump to arrive, so I can't fully put everything together until that's here. Let's build an engine. All right, YouTube, so I'm not sure what order I'm going to put all of this in, but I've got my Vitara pistons, rods, and everything done. I've gapped all of the rings, and I just want to show you, so that no one gets upset, how I did it all. So there's the block. It's already been honed. The block guard is in, as you can see there. Looks pretty good. Fits like a glove. So these are the pistons. They're a cast piston that's then been machined. They're a lot stronger than the factory ones. Nothing too fancy. They're Teflon coated, so they slide up and down the bores. These are the rods. So the rods are at minimum twice as thick in all directions. Very nice and solid and strong. I'm very happy with the quality of those. They're the P2PO D16 Vitara spec pistons. I don't know what that means. They've all got numbers on each side, and I'm not sure if you can see that. So this says 201 and 201, so everything gets paired together. And I'm using those numbers 1 to 4, so 201, 202, 203, 204, so that I know which one goes in which cylinder. So I've already gone and gapped all of the rings and put those all on and assembled each piston and rod in anticipation for the bearings and everything to come. So that's number 4, so that goes in 4. You can see here these arrows. Now on a normal Honda engine, when Honda puts it together, they point the arrows towards cylinder 1 with the writing facing you. But the Vitara pistons, for whatever reason, when they were cast, the larger valve reliefs on the intake side with the arrow are pointing towards the flywheel. So you just got to remember that. You've got to put your bearing caps in so that they're facing towards the front of the engine. So bearing caps towards the exhaust and the arrow towards the flywheel. So I've already gone ahead and done 4, 3, 2. I'm about to do number 1, so I'll just grab the tripod. These rings are already gapped, so I'll show you how I did that. All right, so the way this is done is you first put the ring into the sleeve there, or the cylinder. I get a piston, push it down so it's nice and level. Feeler gauge is out, measure the gap. Now I've set the bottom one to 0.021 thousandths, or however you do that in American. That works out to be 0.533 of a millimeter in the metric measurement. And then you take the top ring, do the same thing there, get the piston, push it down, nice and level. Now these I've done to 0.18, which is 0.457 of a millimeter. And then same thing, measure that so it slides freely up and down and doesn't catch. So now we're going to fit the wrist pin into the piston. You need to make sure this arrow here is pointing towards the flywheel. And on the rod, you need to make sure that these gashes here for the bearings are facing towards the exhaust. So, like so. Put that through there. And then you need to take this little circlip on your circlip pliers. And fit that in there like so. There's a very small channel for that to fit into. There we go, and just give it a push and you can hear that click in. And that's in all the way around. Push the wrist pin back as far as it will go to the other side. Take your other circlip. And clip that in there. Make sure it's in definitely, because you don't want this coming out. There we go. That's such a satisfying clicking noise, that one. All right, so that's in. Now it's rings time. So now it's time to put the rings on. So you take your oil scraper ring, put that on first, and then there is one of these that goes on the bottom. There's no particular order with this. There we go. And then there's another one of those very thin ones for the top. Much easier to do without a camera in your face. There you go. And then obviously you spin those around so that the slots in the rings aren't lining up. I always just go to opposite sides, just to be sure. So you take your bottom ring, snap that on. Boom, just like so. Spin that around. And then top ring, same deal. Bang. And then of course, once you put them in the cylinders, make sure that the rings are facing opposite ways. And that's the assembly of the pistons and the ring gaps done. Okay, comparison time. Because this is all filmed out of sequence, I just want to do a little bit of a comparison with the rods and pistons that I'm using. So we'll start with the factory one. So the overall thickness of the rod is around about 15 millimeters. Now with the new one, we're going up to 23. So quite a big difference there. And in the width on the side, we're at 15. And then this one, the stock one, is at 11 millimeters. So really big differences overall. The rod is the thing that's going to be responsible for the strength of the engine. With the piston, if you've got a bad tune or bad fuel or too much boost and not enough fuel, that's going to get damaged. But the thing you don't want to have is a rod get hot and bend and then send the piston out the side of the block. Now I'm told this is the no notching rod with the slightly extra length, so slightly higher compression. It does look like it's about a bee's dick taller, very hard to see on camera, but slightly longer, which is going to give us stronger compression stroke. But yeah, overall, I'm very, very happy with this. Just got to wait for the bearings to come and I can assemble the bottom end. But this is the main reason why you want to build it, because these tiny little things, as thick as your pinky, no good. I've got the Wiseco piston ring compressing sleeve. That'll make things easy. But yeah, there they all are. Numbered 1 to 4, correctly filed piston ring gaps, so the internet can be happy with me. All right, YouTube, so we are back out in the shed and I'm finally getting the head sorted. So as you can see, I've got all of the cylinders done with the BC valve springs and retainers. So they're all on there. I've replaced all of the valve stem seals. I've just got to do the last two and I'll show you my technique. Now I bought one of these things, a small one. It was crap. I bought a big one. It was crap. This is the part out of that first one. And then the one I showed you earlier from last week's video where it was a massive fail and I couldn't get it to work. So I'm going to show you my technique on how I do the valve stem seals and the valve springs. So just like last time, take your socket extension with a 16mm socket, put it over the edge, get your hammer or a mallet, give that a hit, it comes straight off. So ditch the old spring and retainer, get your trusty magnet and collect the parts. Always one bit that flies somewhere else. There it is. So they're the collets. I called them collars last time, but they're definitely called collets. Get the valve, poke it out. There it is there, sit that aside. The brutal pliers. Sorry if it's a bit dark. It is night time. Rip off the old valve stem seal. Take your new one. First what you want to do is give that a good clean up. So don't forget to put this bad boy on. This is like the retainer for the bottom, but you just use the standard ones of those. Take the valve stem seal, not stem cell, stem seal. Push that on. Get your 10 or 11mm socket. Give it a little wiggle. And then a gentle love tap, like so. That's on. Now normally when I show you guys how I do something, it's a little bit like a how-to. I always tell you I'm not an expert, but I always try and share my knowledge or my working out or my formula for doing things. In this instance, I'm going to not recommend to do what I do. So don't do what Donnie Don't does in this instance, but I'm going to show you what I did and how I did it. Because as we discovered, those tools I bought absolutely sucked. Now I do know there is one, it's kind of shaped like this. It comes with two fittings. Everybody around the world uses them on their Hondas. I should have bought that one first. I didn't really want to smash on the new retainers. So my way around that is cable ties and a vise. So put some cable ties on there. Squeeze it up in the vise, zip them up nice and tight. You can see it's compressed the spring there quite a lot. And then it's just a matter of slide that in, push it down, take your new BC retainer, slam that bad boy on there, take a pair of collets, slide one in the top, one in the bottom. And then I took the side cutters and give that a little snip. One by one they all come off, nice and tight. You can double check along the way that it's not popping out. And then Remove the zip ties. Now there we go, that's in. These aren't coming out at all. I always give it a little test like that to make sure that they're all properly seated. You can hear the valve slapping up and down. Perfectly normal. That's what happens anyway, times 85,000 times per minute on every single one of those for hours and hours at a time if you're at a track. Doing this doesn't really hurt. It's rubber anyway. Now I've got one more to do, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, which means we can finally finish off the head and then it's over to the block. So what I have here is two sets of bearings, the H and the HX, so the standard replacement ones and then the ones that are slightly tighter. I've got the thrust bearings, so they're just a standard one, and I've got the main cap bearings. I don't know which one's which between this box and that box, but we've got it all here. I've got some flexi gauge, so I've done the YouTube certified crash course in how to do this, so I'm gonna get that all sorted. I'll get the flexi gauge on here. I'll do pistons 1 and 4 first, and then spin the crank around and do 2 and 3, measure those. And then do the same thing for the big end, the crankshaft, but I'll have to clean that up. At the moment, it's just sitting there in its old bearings. Without further ado, we're gonna get stuck into this. Now, the reason I have two sets of bearings is because Cameron from Yama Racing recommended it. Now, I trust that guy. He's built millions of engines. He tells me that Honda in the factory mix and matched a lot of their bearings. You might have each individual rod or each individual main cap bearing will have different tolerances on all of them, and they just mix and matched them in the factory, and that's what you got. So that's why I've got two sets. So firstly, I'll stick the standard ones in, do a measurement with the flexi gauge, make sure they're all even and within spec, and hopefully they are. If not, we'll grab the tighter ones and switch them over to the ones that aren't in spec, and then test again, and then hopefully we can work it out so they're all even. So my no notch rod kit, rod and piston set, is now a notch set. Listen to this. That's the rods hitting the side of the sleeve. So now I've got to pull all those apart and machine out the side of the block some more. Far out. It wouldn't be me if I didn't run into some problems. Needed to notch the block out, which I've done now. I've cleaned it up. It's cleaner than it's ever been. So take a look at this. This is the notching job there. So I've had to grind out all the way back on each end there. It's smooth to touch. There's no rough edges. And they're all pretty much even. Nice and wide, ovaled out the bottom of those, so when the rod swings it doesn't hit. So that's all good to go now. I'm going to start assembling it, and hopefully I don't run into any more problems. But yesterday, plastic gauged or flexi gauged all the bearings, all the clearances. I only had to swap out one, which is one of the main cap bearings that was a bit loose, so I've changed that to a different bearing. Otherwise, everything else looks pretty even. Yeah, hopefully I don't run into any more problems. The reason why I didn't show you the grinding down and all of that is there's a million videos already on YouTube. I just realized that that's probably going to be a bit dark because the light was behind me. Here's my face. I'm going to put this on a time lapse and get back to putting it all together. Fingers crossed. All right, snag number 347. Watch here and here. So now we've got the bigger con rods and everything in there. I've clearanced out every cylinder so it doesn't hit when it spins around. But now we've got an issue with this thing, the girdle, whatever you want to call it. Watch just here when I spin the engine. All the way around, beautiful, and bang, just here and here. And then back the other way. Beautiful, bang. Now this one's not such a big drama. I just have to undo all of those. I've only torqued them down the first setting and I was about to do the second run around and nip them all up. I'm going to just undo all these, take this away, give this a good grind, both there and there. Hopefully that doesn't affect the strength of this thing. It shouldn't. Pull this out, take the bearings out, grind away, clean it, wash it, put it back on. Take 3. All right, so clearancing is done. I've bored out on every single one, even though it was only hitting on these two. I've made these holes bigger. It was really thin casting there, so I didn't mean to, but it just bored out, so I made them both bigger. I cleaned up on the other side as well. Got rid of that lip there, so it's a smooth transition. And now to put it back together, finally. Alright, so now the bottom end is all together finally. As you can see, spins quite nice. It's not catching on anything. And the way that you have to do this, you have to test everything out, is a suck test. So that's compression up, touch my hand, and then suck down. Boom! Perfect. YouTube, it's the next day. The engine is put together, which you would have seen in the time lapse. I did run into a few problems, which was the clearancing of the girdle or the main cap part on the bottom. When I turned the engine over, cylinders 2 and 3 were hitting on that, so I've clearanced all 4 of them on both sides just in case heat or anything makes metal expand. So that's all clearanced, it's all done. I've torqued the head down and I texted a friend of mine, Michael Maguire, who builds these engines like they're going out of fashion, specifically the D series. He's got a drag car which should be really fast. It's very angry. So I got some expert advice from some people. I didn't follow the specs on the head gasket sheet or any of the other recommendations. I went from people that I know that have experience with this kind of thing. So fingers crossed. It's very nerve-wracking building an engine for the very first time. I would compare it to being a father, because when you're a dad and you know you make a child, you really don't have any control over what happens next. So you know, in the delivery room, what could go wrong? You can't do anything, you're helpless. And I kind of relay that to building an engine, because I've done my best, I've put it all together, and we'll see what happens when it fires up, if it's going to come to life or not, and if it's going to run, if it's going to work perfectly and, you know, be everything you wanted it to be. So hopefully I get that with my engine and it just works and does everything it's supposed to do. I've still got to fit the rear main seal. I've got that, but I'm going to do that when it's off the stand. The oil pump, I'm waiting for that. There will be an extra video where I high flow or, you know, increase the pressure of the oil pump. People have a lot of success with that, and I've seen it done many times. So I'll get onto that. I've got to order a cam seal and a front main seal, but I'll do that later on. I'm probably going to paint the block once everything's together. I've got to take this down to Trick Fab and get them to weld a bung on there. I'm not going to do the drill through one on this one, since it's off the car and I've got time. I'll get a proper one welded on there. The reason why it took me so long was because I was using a cordless drill and a carbide burr to bore out the bottom of the cylinders so that the rods would clear, and also to clearance things on the girdle. So I kept sending the batteries dead and having to wait to charge those up, so it took days. Now that I've built one motor, I'm confident I could pretty much build any engine. I'll be more confident once this one runs and drives and makes power, but the rods and piston combo, everything like that looks good, turns over good, nice and free, so fingers crossed it should work fine. The reason why I didn't do a step-by-step on how to build an engine, because I've never built one before. The next time I do, I can definitely do a how-to, because I'll have some experience under my belt. With this motor, I was really just watching other people build engines and getting their advice and doing it that way. I really have no place to tell anyone how to build anything if I've never done it before. So that's why I didn't do a how-to. That's why most of this video is going to be on a time lapse. You'll get to see what I did wrong and all the times I stop and scratch my head and, you know, worry and get nervous, but it'll all be there. But the Big D series is ready to fly now. So hopefully we can turn this up to from 14 psi to 20, 25, maybe even 30, and start making some serious power. I'm thinking about, because it's a track car, I might leave it on around 18 psi and then have a switch with an electronic boost controller. On the straights I might give it a flick to say 30, like a boost scramble like they used to do in the old days, so I can get past cars on the straight and then go back to a more manageable boost, because I still don't have an LSD or a built gearbox. So on and off the power through the corners, I might have the boost lower, maybe even 15 or 16 psi, and then flick it to 25 or something on the straights. So should be interesting, and I can do the same thing on the street. I'm cruising around, leave it on a low boost. If I'm having a race, then I can flick the switch, boom, see you later. But that brings us to the end of this video. Sorry it's taken so long to get one out to you guys, but I wanted to make sure I had all the parts, everything was here. Big thank you to Cam from Yama Racing. He helped me out with millions of questions. I was probably doing his head in. And Michael Maguire as well. 2 local guys down here that helped me out. But yeah guys, proud dad moment. I built myself an engine. Just remember, make sure you check out the Patreon page if you can. Sign up and become a Patreon. The more we get, the more things we can do, the bigger the channel grows. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and bring the boost in the next episode.